With Aleph, the 101st chapter of the book of Tehillim, LeDavid, Mizmor, Chesed, Umishpat Ashira, Lecha Adonai Azamera. So we know the last number of chapters we've had, the Lechadod, not Lechadodi, much of the Kabbalat Shabbat. But here, this is a Psalm of David, which is going to talk about something else. It's not about God and worshiping God and eventually the whole world coming and worshiping God and not being like the generation of the desert, as we've seen over the last number of chapters. This is the chapter where David sings of faithfulness, of justice, chesed umishpat, which oftentimes are sort of, I wouldn't say conflicting, but not necessarily the same. Mishpat, justice, judgment, chesed, kindness, going beyond, one might say, the letter of the law. L'cha Hashem azamera, I will chant, I will sing a song to you, O God. Askila bederech tamim, matai tavo elai, et halech betam livavi, bekerev beiti. I will try to use my seichel to understand, right, to see the ways of those who are tamim, who are blameless, who are complete. When will I, like them, become complete? I will live without blame in my house. Interesting to think about. If David, when did he say this? When was he asking to walk publicly without any blame, without any mistakes, especially bekerev beiti, within his own house, where David sinned with Bathsheba in his own house? Beiti doesn't just mean, it can mean family, it can mean house, and the horrors that David undergoes after that. Is that after that terrible sin? Is this an attempt to be? Is this an attempt to offer part of the repentance that David, part of the process he went through? Was this earlier in life? And unfortunately, like many of us, he strayed. Unclear, but interesting to think about. You can all have your own theories. Lo ashit leneged einai dvar blial ose seitim saneti lo yidbakbi. I will not place before my eyes anything base or horrific. We've seen this word blial, without an ol, without a yoke, or without somebody who can out somebody who has a chance to get up, was the word that was used. Chana says to Eli, don't consider me a bat blial. Eli's sons there in the beginning of Shmuel are called Bnei Blial. You can use whatever four-letter word or whatever you want to sort of understand what it means. So I don't want to have anything base, anything evil, anything horrific in front of my eyes. I have to remove. I hate dealing with things that are seitim, that are crooked, that are unstraight. Lo yidbak bi, davek, devek, right? Glue, I will not have them come close to me. I will not have them attached to me. I'm going to remain far away. Sur meira, stay away. Sur, turn from evil. We're in verse 4. Pasuk daled, leva vikesh asur mimeni ra lo eda. So ikesh means things that are perverse. So he's asking for perverse or foreign things to be far away from them. I do not want to know evil. I'll have nothing. I will have no da'at. I will have no knowledge of evil. Pasuk Hey, milashni vasete re'ehu oto atzmit giva einaim rechab levav oto lo uchal. The person who with his lashon, with his tongue, slanders his friend vaseter in secret. What am I going to do to him? I am going to destroy him. Right? I cannot be with, I'm lo uchal, I can't possibly be with people who are haughty, people who are proud, people who think that they're so great. I don't want to be with people of arrogance. He says to us here. Okay, and that's not a simple thing if we're talking about somebody who's a king. King is oftentimes surrounded by good people, great people, wise people, but generally people with a very healthy sense of self. We'll leave it that way. Einai b'ne'emanei eretz lashevet imadi olech b'derech tamim hu yisharteni. My eyes are on the trusted men of the land, right? My eyes who walk in the path of tamim, of blameless. Hu yisharteni. They will be the people who will serve me, right? So we think about here exactly what we just said. If oftentimes kings are surrounded by wise men and people with great egos, and who have attained a status. The king becomes the king probably because his father was the king, but the men around him, it's based upon their wisdom, their strength, whatever it might be. Oftentimes it has to do also with your lineage. But here, what David says is, I don't want to be with the people of great arrogance. I want the people who are blameless. Lo yeshev b'kerev beiti osei rimiyah dover shkarim lo yikon leneged einai. Those who are deceitful, they will not live in my house. Where they're rimiyah, right? Those who speak lies shall not be before my eyes. And many times in this book, David talks about the sheker that was said about him, the lies that were said about him by Shaul, by others in their attempts to kill him when he was running away. So, right, if you want to look at this chapter a different way, you can look at it as this is when David's running away and he knows he's going to be king and he knows he's going to have this house. It's already been foretold to him by Shmuel Hanavi, by Samuel the prophet. And maybe he's saying, as opposed to the way things are now, this is the way I am going to run things. La bikarim atzmit kol rishei aretz. Each morning, what am I going to do? I'm going to destroy the wicked of the land, lahachrit me'ir Adonai kol po'alei avin, to rid the city of God, of all those who do evil. So here it says the city of God. So, right, that would be, you could take that as an indication of that it's talking about Yerushalayim, right, which has been named sort of the city of God during the time of David. He's been told where the temple is going to be in the land that he buys in the last chapter of the book of Shmuel from Arvona Hayevusi. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the phrase city of God doesn't have to necessarily be referring to the city of Jerusalem. It could be something that he's hoping for, that he's saying he's going to try to do as king. To me, one thing that's interesting in this chapter is there are, at least to me, some sort of allusions to Yaakov and the life of Yaakov here. We have the word rimiyah, mirma. Rimiyah is what Yaakov uses when he tricks his father. I believe Yitzchak says, "Ba'achicha b'mirma," the same like that's in verse 7. And the idea of the people who would not sin in his tent, as opposed to Yaakov, who is described as, right, Yaakov ishtam Yoshev ohalim. Yaakov was a man who was pure, who was complete, who sat in the tent. So David's talking about what his tent will be like. And clearly, the first half of the chapter, the word that's most important is the word tamim. That's what he wants to be. He wants to be with the people who are tam. So maybe one way of understanding this chapter and thinking of this chapter, we've tried to talk about different types in David's life. Maybe this is after David has sinned with Bathsheba. Maybe he's made these mistakes, and maybe he's looking back in history and he's looking back at Yaakov, who made some questionable decisions early on in his life, tricking his father, sort of taking advantage of his brother's hunger. And the same way Yaakov sort of transcends from that and becomes Yisrael, and right, Yaakov, karma, Yaakov, right, he tricks his father, and then he himself is tricked and he's blinded in the episode, right? In a sense, it's dark, it's night, he can't see, so he takes the place of his father when Lavan switches the wives, and Lavan says the next morning, it is not the custom in our place to give the younger before the older. And so Yaakov gets the karma, if you want to say punishment, it gets what he deserves, but straightens out his life. And perhaps David, you could understand this chapter and say it's the only way, with the allusions and some of the language related to Yaakov, that maybe this is after David had sinned with Bathsheba, after he had been exiled by perhaps his son Avshalom, after the death of multiple children. And maybe this is a meditation and a hope of part of that process of repentance, like Yaakov, who is able to move from what he was described as the Akev, growing in life. Maybe I can do the same thing. And that is what I want to be. I also want to be an Ishtam Yoshevo Alim. I want to be a person of purity. That's the people who I want to walk with. I do not want to have sinners. I do not want to have liars. Bekerev Beiti, I do not want them in my